Alright guys, I'm just going to go over a basic loadout for beginners for each VT. So start with the vets. You got the 140 and 67 chain gun, and then for really hard to hit targets you got the rack and grenade. Wouldn't take any fuel tanks, just waste of weight at this stage. You have also got the RI, which some people use, but as a beginner I'd stick with the 140. MVets is pretty much the same sort of thing. Again, you got the RI if you want, but 140, 67. Attacks. So you got the rockets. When they're sort of, the 200 to 400 range, and when they're really close you've also got the 120 with the 67, and obviously for long distances you got the howitzer. Again, no sub-tanks because it's first gen. Third gen Juggernaut, 355 RF. Make sure it's the RF, not the smooth ball. See so many newer players with the smooth balls. You've got your PZ missiles. You could just take one to save getting mixed up when you're changing your weapons, but you've got plenty of weight to have two. And obviously railgun, DP mess, and make sure you got your sub tank, which is a general basic setup. You got your 200 ARs, DP, 67, no sub-tanks. Some people do switch weapons to cheat the reload. Blade, similar sort of thing. DP, 270, 200, one tank. Fuel tank more important being a second gen with override. Decider being a first gen, no need for fuel tanks. TR pretty deadly. Then you've also got the 140 for harder to hit targets. Got the 67 chain gun, and plasma torch is pretty useless. Being a first gen you haven't really got the battery. Scareface. Smooth ball, sniper, if you fancy trying to snipe people. 80 chain gun, pretty deadly in first gens. T grenades, again no need for any sub tanks. If you don't fancy sniping you can always go for the rack for really hard to hit targets and take an extra T grenade, just for more proximity. Obviously the sniper gives you that range, depending on what map you're on. A1, don't really recommend it for newer players, but yeah, you can just smooth ball, mark for marking people, 80 chain gun, T grenades, again no fuel tank. Some people do rack it all out, shoot racks and T grenades, particularly if you're against falchions. Smooth ball and the 80 chain gun gives you that extra damage against the first gens. M1, not really my favourite, but here you got 315 RF missiles, 80 chain gun, plasma torch, and 2 sub tanks. Is well within the weight limit. Some people do put an extra missile on there, especially to get rid of the just so you stand it over and missile boat people. I always find it's very important to have as many sub-tanks as possible with second and third gens. Using override so much when you're engaged. M2, again 315 RF, rail, MMs, 2 sub-tanks. Yeah, you stand it over pretty much. Whatever you do. M3. You have a 355 RF this time, rail MMs and 2 tanks. Obviously you can always ditch 1 tank when you're in battle. Scared 2, so 355 smoothball, PZ missiles, particularly if you're a beginner. You got the 100 chain gun which will tear anything up, but then if you're fighting anything like a Jarlax that's got more armour, you've also got the T grenades. Obviously your 2 sub tanks, but it does put you standard over. If you do want to snipe instead of missiles, you can always put the 370 sniper on there. And again, if you ditch 1 tank, it gets rid of the standard over. Like I say, I always prefer to have 2. APR, 270 AR, stun rod, mortar DPs with 1 tank. Puts you perfect within the weight. It is more of a VT for more advanced players, just because of how weak they are and how easy they are to fall over if you're not careful. But obviously it is the fastest VT. So Quasar, basic setup, 355 RF, rail, DPs. You also got the plasma torch if the occasion calls for it, and then you've got the 1 sub tank. So GRC, pretty much bring everything. Smoothball 140 and a marker to help your teammates. The mines, pretty important to keep yourself protected. T grenades, obviously you got your cutter boom, both sub tanks, then you can always ditch 1 to get rid of the standard over. But some people do play around with flamethrowers and napalm and stuff. If you start with that basic setup, you can always play around with them later. The NSR, 430 smoothball, you got the 140 for harder to hit targets. Again, you got the mines to keep you protected, your cutter boom, your DP miss, and both sub tanks. Takes you nicely in your weight. GRM, sort of basic setup would be a 140 and DP for close range, and then your HV and howitzers for long range, and obviously both sub tanks, so you can ditch 1 again. The only problem with this setup is if you're against other jars or larger VTs, it's sometimes hard to get the 140 in range because of the armour. But you can play around with the setup and have a smoothball and ditch other things. So Regal N, you got the 430 smoothball, missiles, SLGMs, T grenades and a tank. It's very similar to a Scare 2 to be fair, but a lot of the time you're against other 3rd gens when you're in a Regal, so it's better to really have the T grenades. As soon as you start going with the 135 and 100s you end up struggling to get in range due to the 3rd gen's armour. Regal A, so you got the MK rockets and 140. And obviously T grenades again for close range. Then you can use your 12 MLRs, which is like a proximity sort of thing. You can straight line them, but it's something you've sort of got to learn as you go on. And then obviously the howitzer as well, all for long range. You can change that for SLGMs, for missiles. That's sort of a basic setup to start with, then you can experiment. Behemoth, I'd only really bring this on certain maps because it's not the most manoeuvrability out of all the VTs, so you got just rockets really as main weapons for close range, howitzer, MLRs again for long range. 135, which again struggles to hit certain VTs in the same sort of weight bracket, And then yeah, your 2 sub-tanks. So Maelstrom, another support class. So you can have the 140 and the 67, this is sort of your close range protection. And then your 370 howitzer and 8 MLRs for long range, which still gives you 2 sub-tanks. You can go to the 550 howitzer and drop the chain gun, depending on what sort of setup you want to go with. Some people do have dual MLRs, the better you get with the MLRs, the more worthwhile it is. But you do soon run out. Sheepdog, pretty basic one. So yeah, 120 chain gun if you want to bring a marker into your grenades. If you want to bring the 140 and fight more, get rid of the marker. Bring grenade, still brings you within the standard, which you really want. Being such a fast VT, you want to outmaneuver everything, no armour. So guard pike, and 270 AR and a 200 AR. Mines to keep you protected. Bang needles obviously. 135 MG and 2 tanks. Again, ditch a tank, gets rid of the standard over. You can change that for a 140. Which will help against blades and things. So a Zug, 355 RF, SLGMs, and then a 135 for when you're really close. You have got the shield binder, but you don't get to use it very often because it's the way it gets operated. It's obvious that it's coming, so it leaves you vulnerable. And then obviously your 2 sub-tanks. Zigzag back to first gens. So smoothball, DPs. You also got your 80 chain gun and a 140. Harder to hit targets. You can have markers. And, play around with the setup if you want to mark people, depending what you're going to use more. Even if you did smoothball and markers, pretty good setup. You can even have T grenades. You didn't want to use the 140. But that would be like your basic fighter setup. But then if you want to bring the marker as well, whether you take the 315 or the 140, depending how confident you are with freehanding to get them hits that you need, it could go something like that. Again, no sub-tanks because it's first gens. Colt 140, rack, and a marker. Then you got your DPs, but you've only got a 67 chain gun. Obviously no sub-tanks. Obviously no smoothball as well. Was it an RI? Yeah. Cab. So 430 smoothball, rail, DPs, and 2 sub-tanks pretty much takes you up to your maximum. You'd have to ditch both tanks to get rid of the standard over. But yeah, I've got effectively a 3rd gen rail, if you can get the hits. Shaker, again being a 3rd gen, your 355 RF. Marker, just for fun. Get your railgun, DPs, and cores when you think the time's appropriate, and you actually get 2 sub-tanks with this 3rd gen. The rail's great, but it does leave you vulnerable whenever you use it. Getting rid of your battery, plus people can see it coming, so sometimes you find it's better using the RF and the DPs. You're really close to people. Jackie, TR, pretty deadly, the TR and T grenades. Then you can also get your 140 on there if you're against really hard to hit targets. Plus, if you bring a marker, you can mark everybody up for your teammates. If you're in Conquest, and you can still bring your 2 sub-tanks, just bring your standard over. Obviously you'd have to ditch both of them to get rid of the standard over. And then if you didn't bring the marker and ditch one, then it gets rid of you. Ditch 140. So you've got your marker, you still got your TR, 2 sets of T grenades, because you soon run out of T grenades. Then you only got to ditch 1 sub-tank to get rid of the standard over. And then the side of Volcanic. So you can have your 140 and 67 for close up, and your howitzer for getting things between 900 and 2000, particularly on hills and things. Obviously if they're in 5th gear, your howitzer's not going to hit them. You've also got the 270 RI, which you haven't really got much to choose from in main weapons, so you may as well bring it. Like I say, that was all a very sort of basic run through of weapon loadouts that you can do. Hopefully it's come to some sort of help.